was not perfect. Okay, now today's our topic is about personal protective equipment, which is module number 6. Up till now, we covered first topic about introduction to OSHA and safety regulations. Then we discuss about safety management elements. Remember how many elements of safety management are there? Can anyone recall elements of safety management? Kalas, forget everyone.
No, sir, I've done it. Elements.
Remember there were
8 elements, sir.
very good 8 elements, which includes
Commitment and leadership, safety
very good.
involvement, education training, accident
Safety
investigation,
involvement.
accountability, continuous improvement.
Exactly.
I was just checking the notes. Okay.
Very good, very good. And what about the hazard? What is hazard?
Potential.
Anything that has a potential to cause harm.
Yeah, exactly. And what about the risk assessment? Remember how many, what about the hierarchy of controls?
Yes, sir, it's elimination, substitution, engineering,
Substitution.
administrative, and protective equipment.
Great, great, great. So now this, when we say that personal protective equipment, so this is the last line of our control, right? Personal protective equipment. So that's why after having the risk assessment, after having the electrical safety and fire safety, we are going to discuss the risk assessment, the personal protective equipment. So personal protective equipment, or we can say PPE, it is being discussed in 1910 code, and the section is 132. This standard or our code required that employer should provide the PPEs. Remember in the first, on the first day in the first lecture, we discussed about the responsibilities of employer. So
Yes.
employers, it is a responsibility of employer that after doing the risk assessment, whenever there is a need for personal protective equipment, they have to provide the work related personal protective equipment to the employees free of cost, right? So before starting the personal protective equipment, we need to do one thing. Who is going to tell us about the personal protective equipment, that we have to use PPE here? Which study is going to tell us? How do we know that we have to use PPE here? Yes, guys. How do we know that we have to use?
When we are exposed to hazardous place.
No, it's okay. When you are exposed to hazardous place, it's okay. But who is going to tell us? I mean, you will wear the PPE from your own wish, or if safety department is going to teach you, on what basis? You can ask, why should I use? What are the basis for them?
Usually, Bosch, these modules.
No.
It is being mentioned to the method of data statement.
Yes, it something like this. What else? Another thing which we did yesterday. Another thing which we did yesterday was the risk assessment. Our risk assessment control is going to define the PPEs.
Yes.
You cannot define the PPE from your experience. I cannot define the PPE from my experience. Our risk assessment study will tell us that, okay, which PPEs we have to use and when do we need to use, because in the risk assessment, we will be covering our activities. On the risk assessment, we will be covering our all locations and areas. So we need to define the risk assessment in our risk assessment, that we have to use this PPE. And OSHA also required the same thing, that before using the PPE, you must do the risk assessment, and before using the PPE, you must try, if possibly, elimination, substitution, engineering control, administrative control, then go for the PPE. Don't go directly for the PPEs, right? Because PPE is the last level of control. After PPE, there is no option. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. The examples of PPEs are, for example, for our eye protection, we use goggle, we use safety glasses, we use face shield for the face protection, we use head for hard hats for the head protection, we use feet for our safety shoes, like for our feet. We use gloves. There are multiple types of gloves. There are multiple types of vests for the bodies, and for the hearing protection, we use ear muff and ear plug. There are there are more example of PPEs as well, but these are the most common example. Nowadays, there is another common PPE, which is the, apart from these things, which is the most common nowadays?
N95.
Very good, very good. Your face mask is one of the most common PPE everyone is
Papa.
using today. Even
Papa.
if they are working in the safety, or no, they have to wear this. Even if they are in the company or they are outside the company, they have to wear this.
Even though if you're going Bakhala, you have to wear it.
Exactly, exactly. So this is self-defense. This is
Yeah.
how safety affects everyone. Okay, so the standard required that before starting using of PPEs, you need to develop an PPE program. Okay, we need to set out which of the procedures they are needing the PPEs. We need to see our risk assessment, that where we need to apply the PPEs, and then we need to make a simple chart for the PPEs program. For example, the risk assessment, the hazard, the required PPE, how many persons are exposed to this PPE, and how much quantity do we need to available at all the time, for example, in your store or in your department. So because most of the PPEs are consumable, most of the PPEs are like one time, right? They are disposable. Once you will use, and then you have to throw them, and then you need to use again. The next time you have to use the new PPE. So the quantity is very necessary to define. What will happen if you have the quantity available, that there will be a check and balance, that before ending of the PPE, for example, you will say we need to have 100 PPEs available all the time. So once you will reach the minimum available stock, for example 90, or for example 20 PPEs are remaining now, 20 masks are remaining now. So now it's a time to make the new request for the more PPEs, because if you will be waiting for the ending of PPEs, then you need to stop the work, which you cannot stop, right? So that's why first thing what we need to do in first column, for example, the chart of PPE will include the hazard, the required PPEs, how many persons are using this PPE, and the minimum quantity. So in this way, the HSC department will have the check and balance. Similarly, we can share this thing with our store also, that if the store is having the PPE stock available, and they are responsible for the provision of PPEs, so we can ask our store department to maintain like this. So there will be no chance that, because sometimes when we are on the site, when I'm going to my different clients, I have seen that sometimes the clients, they have without PPEs, and when you ask them why you are without PPE, so they come up with this lame excuse that it's just finished today, so by tomorrow it will come. So the accident, the injury is not going to wait for tomorrow, right? If you are working today without PPE, so the accident can also be possible today without PPE. So it's not going to wait for you. No, tomorrow you will be using PPE. So today I will not come. We are going to give you one day privilege. So today you will be lucky, and tomorrow, once you have the PPE, then you can have the accident. It's not like this, right?
Yeah.
So training for PPE is very necessary. because we have seen many times the people are using wrong PPEs. Sometimes they are using wrong PPEs, and sometimes the way they are using the PPE is incorrect. Right? For example, where you have to wear the heat resistant gloves, you are wearing the cotton gloves. Where you have to wear the cut resistant gloves, you are wearing the normal cotton gloves. So incorrect PPEs for the job is very dangerous, because the consumer who is going to use this PPE, in his mind, he thinks that since I am wearing the PPE, so I am safe now. But in actually, he is on more risk, because he, on the back of his mind, that he thinks that I'm safe. For example, if you have to wear the helmet, and this helmet is not the good quality, in your senses, or if you are wearing the safety shoes, you think that my safety shoes, my helmet is a very strong strength, but in actual it is not the strong strength. And if there will be any accident, this PPE is not going to save you, this PPE is not going to protect you, so it's a useless. Sometimes we have seen, on especially those people who are working on the construction site, they will find that the workers, those who are using the safety harness, they don't know how to use the safety harness. Sometimes, just to show the safety officer, they wear the safety harness, but they are not hanging, or they are not locking the safety harness. Sometimes they are wearing the safety harness, but only the half safety harness they are wearing, like safety belt. They are not going to save their legs with this safety harness. So using the right PPE for the right job, and using the PPE in a correct way, these both things are very important. So we need to train our people on how to use the PPE correctly. For this purpose, you can have toolbox talks, you can have small training for them, awareness training. You can show them the videos when you are doing the induction. So they should know those PPEs which they are going to use on daily basis, how they are going to use it. And then another thing which is very important is how to discard this PPE, right? Sometimes we have seen that on site, on floor, we will find some used gloves, sometimes used masks, sometimes some other activities. So the use of PPE is very important. In the meantime, we need to teach them how to use the PPE, correct type of PPE for the correct type of job, and how to use the PPE in a correct way. And the last thing, how to discard or dispose of this PPE. Clear? Any question?
No.
Very good. So these are some of the PPEs you can see, which includes safety spectacles. When we are going to use any like carpenting activity, like wooden chips are there. So we can use, if you are working on a lathe machine, you can use safety spectacles. But if you are dealing with the chemicals, if there is a liquid or there are vapor involved with this chemical, we need to use the goggles, right? And then when you are using you are doing the cutting activities, welding activities, it's always
Shields.
better to use the welding shields, which are required for the welders. Similarly, then we have head protection. Head protection is very necessary. It is necessary for both operations. Sometimes when you are working on a ground floor and there are some overhead activities are going on, for example, crane is going overhead, there are some construction activities going on overhead, so then you will be using this helmet. And sometimes there is no such overhead activities are going on, but you are working inside the machine. For example, you are a maintenance department, you are a maintenance engineer, so you are going inside the confined space, or you are going inside the maintenance. So it might be possible that once you are sitting now, and then you will stand up, your head is going to hit with any of the ground or any of the surface, and it can cause you some accident or some injury. So that's why it is not always necessary that we will be using the helmet when there are construction activities or overhead activities, but in wherever there is a chance that your head can hit any of the surface, or any surface can hit your head, we need to use the head protection or helmets. Now, this is a new thing for you. It will not be in the book. If you want to note or if you want to take the picture, you can take the picture for this. Classes of hard hats. There are 3 classification of hard hats. Class G means journal. Before it was up to the 2 years before, it was like ABC. Now they have changed to make it more easier. So now it's class G. Class G means general, for the general purpose. For example, you are working in a construction company, you are working in a company in a steel industry where there is a chance that your head can hit something. So you will be using general purpose helmet, which can also absorb up to 2200 volts, right? Then we have class E for electrical. So electrical work, we can use the electrical helmet, which is like going to protect you up to the 20,000 volts. And it's a very good, for example, our electrical engineers, electrical maintenance department, they should use the electrical type of helmet. And then we have class C. Class C is the conductive or the normal classification. As I told you, sometimes you are working under the machines, sometimes you are working in the confined space, so no need to wear a very heavy helmet. You can use the class C bump cap, which is normally going to protect you from any of the particles which can hit your head. Like, any question? Yes,
No, it's
guys.
okay.
Other guys, it's okay. Any
Yeah,
question up till
it's
now?
okay. It's okay. No question for that.
Okay, very good.
It's okay, sir.
So now we have hearing protectors. Hearing protectors, there are 2 to 3 types. Mostly we can divide into 2 main types: ear muff and ear plugs. And then you can see also there are some canal caps are also available. So always remember, ear plugs are our disposable. You will use them one time and this will be for a personal use. Any of the PPE which you are going to use, it's for the personal purpose. So ear muff can reduce up to 30 decibel, which means too much. But on the other side, ear plug can reduce up to 15 to 18 decibel, right? So if you are working in a low noise area, you can use ear plug. But if you are, for example, you are working on aircraft, so if you go out of the aircraft, you heard lot of noise, right? Or if you are working in a generator room as a generator operator or generator engineer or maintenance engineer, or if you are working near the boiler house, so these areas, they always have high noise. So in this case, we can use ear muff. Otherwise, we can use our earplugs or canal caps for lower level of noise. Sometimes if your boss is shouting on you or your wife is shouting on you, I have also my earplugs available in my home, so I use them. Self-defense.
Self-defense.
Okay, then we have the foot. Foot injuries are very common in the industries. Some of the injuries are due to not wearing the safety shoes, because whenever we are going with our foot, and unfortunately due to our eyes, they are on the top of our body, so we always look ahead. Most of the time we don't see down, but we see front. So sometimes we hit with any of the solid objects, sometimes any sharp nails, they can go in our foot. So safety shoes are always a very important, and you remember that all the safety lies in the safety shoes for the workers. So that's why safety shoes are very important. So if you will not be using the safety shoes, to use the safety shoes, again, it is very necessary to use the safety shoes in a correct way. Because what happened that the safety shoes, you can clean them from the top. What about the inside? If these are washable, you can wash them, but most of the time safety shoes are not washable, right? So what do you do in this case to clean them from inside? Because sometimes when you are on site or when the temperature is high in the kingdom, temperature goes up to 48, 50, 46. So you will have lot of sweating in all over the body. So similarly, your socks are also getting moist. So in this case, the sole of the safety shoes, which has steel toe, so it is going to be removed. The leather from that side is going to be removed. And when you are walking every day, so your toe is going to hit the sole, right? And then there is a chance that you will get infected. In your toe, you can get infection. So these things are very necessary to focus on. That to clean your safety shoes are very necessary, because due to the germs, due to the moisture, your foot can have the any kind of infection available. So what is the simplest way to sanitize your safety shoes? Anyone can give the idea?
Me, I usually use silica gel. After I use the safety shoes, I put
Mhm.
that one inside to absorb the moisture and also the smell.
Very good, very good. What else? If silica gel is not available,
Put powder.
go for powder. Okay. What else?
The sun, under the sun.
Very good, very good. This is the most simplest way. Whenever you go for salah, whenever you go for prayer, or you remove your safety shoes, just try to keep them under the sun, right? So this is a natural sanitizer that you will do with your shoes, and it will be a very helpful activity for you guys to uh, to make your safety shoes sanitized. But sometimes those people who are living in the apartment, the provision of sunlight is not available. So at your work, at your side, you can find some place so where you can keep your safety shoes. But keep in mind that keep the safety shoes in a secure area. Otherwise, any of your other colleague can wear this.
Alibaba.
Yes. Okay. Then we have hand protection. As we can see, there are number of types of accidents are possible if we are not going to use the gloves. Correct gloves for the correct job. It is very necessary, because burns, bruises, abrasion, cuts, punctures, fractures, amputations, chemical exposure. These are all possibilities are with the not wearing of gloves. So we need to be very careful while we are going to use the gloves. We need to order the gloves in a full with standard. You just write NC, ANSI, 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 NSI. NSI standard for PPEs. Okay. So whenever you are going to use the PPE, or whenever you are going to purchase the PPE, before going to purchase, just check. For example, you need to have cut resistant gloves. So what will be the standard for this cut resistant glove? Go to the Google and write NSI code for cut resistant gloves. So this will give you the international code for the cut resistant glove. Then you are going to ask your purchase department or procurement department that we need the gloves with this standard. For example, NSI code for safety harness, NSI code for safety shoes. So otherwise they will bring something which is the most cheaper. How do the purchase people, they purchase any of the stuff or material? Any idea about that? Your purchase department, how do they purchase the stuff?
Quotations, and they send it to companies.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time, what they do, for example, once any of the department
Ask.
is going to request for any of the material, so they will see, okay, what is the material, and they will ask 2-3 companies to submit the quotation, and whatever the cheapest, or whatever, if the friend of purchase department guy is available, so they will purchase with them, right? And once they are going to purchase, because their KPI, their target is to bring the things as cheap as possible to reduce the cost for the company. So once they will bring, if you are going to ask them cut resistant gloves, unfortunately we never check if it is really a cut resistant gloves or no. Unfortunately we don't check if it is a heat resistant gloves or no. unfortunately we don't check if the safety shoes which we are going to distribute to our people, if they are really going to protect us with the load or no. How many of you check before using it? We just trust, right? We just trust that okay, if something is coming from my store, it is good quality. But as a safety professional, we need to check them before issuance. Once any of the PPEs are going to be purchased, we need to check them, inspection, and then approve it to take in the store. So how the purchase people are going to purchase, it depends on how you are going to give them the request. If you will write clearly that we need the PPE, for example, cut resistant gloves of this code, NSI code 446, for example. So they will ask the quotation for this particular code. But if you are not going to give them the full information, then from where they will take the full information? They are not the technical people. They are not the safety people. So they depend on you. So it is your responsibility to provide them the full information that about the PPE which you want to purchase. For example, if the maintenance department, they need one capacitor or one bearing, they always write that we need the bearing of 6 number from ABC company, made in Japan, blah, 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 right? But when you are going to request the PPEs, you just write that safety shoes. You just write cut resistant gloves. So there are 100 types of cut resistant gloves. So he can bring anyone, and then you don't have any option. So it's always recommended that you should write the correct code. So in this case, you will get the thing which is perfect. Clear? So now we will discuss some requirements of safety harness. Full body harness. Full body harness must be solely for employee safeguarding. You can see when the people are working on height, they have to use the full body harness. The requirement for here also in the kingdom, it is a legal requirement that you need to carry out a third party inspection for the full body harness. This third party, when you say third party, it means the competent person. If in your company you have some competent person available who can have authorization and the qualification to do the inspection, they can do the inspection. Otherwise, you have to ask the third party, for example, TUV or any other company, to make the inspection of your full body harness. Similarly, lifting equipment, any of the thing which can be used for the lifting. If it is a accessories, if it is a crane, if it is a forklift, the requirement in the Saudi Arab is now to have this inspection minimum of 1 year, right? So in the full body harness, we can see that the lifeline must support it 5,400 pounds of dead weight, because we don't know how much will be the weight of a person who is going to use. So the lifeline must be as strong as possible. Maybe possible that there are more than 4 or 5 persons are attached with the same lifeline. So lanyard, which is attached with the safety harness, it should be it should also have a breaking strength of 5,400. Lanyard must not allow fall over a 6 feet, because if it is going to allow you more than 6 feet, it might be possible that you can hit another place and you will get injured. So it is very necessary that we should not allow the lanyard for the long length, right? Hardware must be dropped, forged or pressed steel, for example, cadmium plate. Hardware surface must be smooth and free of sharp edges. So these are some requirements of for the full body harness which we can use. Any question? Yes, guys. Any question?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, great. Now I'll show you the video. I hope. I don't know if it will be with the sound or without sound. Can you see the video now?
Yes, we see.
What about the sound?
No
No
sound.
sound.
No sound?
No.
This is what is going to be happen if we are not going to use helmet. If anything fall on you, this will happen. You can see with the normal glasses what's going to be happen. Okay, guys. Any question?
No, sir.
Okay, let's have a break for 5 minutes and then we will continue again. This, it doesn't mean that these hazards are those hazards which we have discussed in the risk assessment. Rather, this hazard communication is about HAZCOM, which is related to the hazardous material. Okay, this hazard communication is about the hazards which are related to the hazardous materials. These hazardous material could be the chemical, could be an oil, could be the lubricants, could be the any bleaching powder, whatever is going to harm the human, this material can be classified as hazard, right? And this hazard communication chapter is going to discuss about those material, what are the requirements for employer, what are the requirements for employee as well. Clear? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so the scope of this hazard HAZCOM, there are three parties who are responsible while dealing with the HAZCOM. In OSHA standard, they have developed a dedicated standard for hazard communication, which is HCS 1910 and section is 1200. In 2012, they have issued a standard, a special standard related to the HAZCOM, which defined the responsibility for three parties. The first party who is responsible for the Huawei 9Y9, please mute yourself. Okay, I have muted. So hazard communication is being divided, the responsibilities into three parties. Number one party is the manufacturer who is going to manufacture the chemical. This could be a chemical, as I told you, this could be a hazardous material. What is the responsibility of the manufacturer? He is responsible for develop two things. Number one, the hazardous material label, okay, the label which is going to paste on the bottle of this hazardous material, and the MSDS. Okay, the label and the material is the responsibility of this person or this manufacturer who is going to manufacture the chemical. For example, in our case, we have Sabic, we have Sadara, we have many refineries who are working, or who are petrochemicals who are working with the manufacturing of chemicals. So it is their responsibility to develop MSDS and their responsibility to develop label for this hazardous material. Then we have second party is called importer or the distributor. For example, if you go to Sabic and you will ask that I need 500 kg of this chemical, they will say don't come to us directly, please go to our distributor, our authorized distributors, and those who are taking with them in the bulk, and then they are going to sell it as a retail. So this Sabic or this the distributor for this hazardous chemical or hazardous material, they have two responsibility again. Their responsibility is to take this label and MSDS with the manufacturer, so they can issue to the consumer or to the buyer directly. So now the chemical is in your facility. Once you are going to purchase this chemical is now has arrived in your facility. So once this chemical will come in your facility, now you have three responsibilities. The first responsibilities for you is to ask, if the supplier is not going to give you the label or the MSDS, it is your responsibility to ask them about the label. So they will provide you the label. The second responsibility for you is to take the MSDS, right? And the third responsibility for you is to train your people on this MSDS. right? The third responsibility for the employer is to train the people or train the chemical handler on this according to the requirement of MSDS. So there are three responsibilities for the employer, two responsibilities for the distributors, and two responsibilities for the manufacturer. So while we will have this chemical now available with us, we have the MSDS available, we have the label available. Now what we are going to do, we are going to develop a hazard communication program. A hazard communication program is also a same program where we are going to identify the area, which of the area this hazardous material is going to be stored, who employees are going to use this, right? And how much, which of the PPEs are required, right? Hello, guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we need to develop the hazard communication program, which will be guiding towards that what are the requirements necessary to for the purpose of dealing and storing of chemicals within our facility. So hazardous material could be in many forms. The most common forms are, it could be in the form of dust, like small particles. It could be in the form of gas, right? It could be in the form of solid particles. It can be in the form of liquid. It could be in the form of vapor, mist, fumes, like, and similarly, it could be in the form of, there is another thing called, we call it asbestos, fiber. The chemical could be in the form of fiber. What is fiber? Fiber is a very light particle, right? It's a very small particle. Dust, even smaller than the dust. The size of the particle size for the fiber is lesser than the dust. What happened that once we are exposed to the dust in our nasal system, in our nose, subhanallah, we have a natural filter available, right? How this natural filter is available? By means of yes, guys. How this natural filter is available? In our nose, there is a natural filter available. So how it works?
Through inhalation.
It helps us in inhalation. Definitely, it helps us. We have the hair. There are hair in our nose, right? It's a
Right.
very good filter. This is a God-gifted filter in our noses, that whenever we have the dust particles or the particle size which is more than 5 micron, it is going to stop here in our nasal system. It is not going to go inside our lungs, inside our respiratory system. So then after that, what happened that we get sneeze, and then filter is clean. Or once you are going to do the wudu, this filter is going to be clean directly. So now the filter, every filter, it requires maintenance, like the filter of your air condition, the filter of your car air condition, every filter, they need the maintenance. So similarly, our natural filter is also required to maintain. So once we get sneeze, this filter is going to be clean. But fiber are less than 5 micron. So they can easily go into our respiratory system, and then they can destroy our respiratory system, right? So this is also a form of hazardous substance. So the most common example of fiber are asbestos. Have you heard the word asbestos?
Yes.
Yes.
So where is the asbestos? What are the examples? Where can we find the asbestos?
You're going to use the piping insulation or
Insulation, yes.
construction.
Very
The
good, very good, very good. There are asbestos sheets. There are insulations in which the asbestos is involved. There are any of the material which is manufactured from cement, it contains asbestos, right?
Not anymore, I think used خلاص.
Yeah, exactly. But now asbestos is banned in UK, right? But in America,
Yes.
it is not banned. Now again, it's a business, because America is the largest producer of asbestos material. So they say, no, it's not a problem for asbestos. But UK says, no, it's very hazardous to the human health. So that's why there is no doubt that asbestos is the cancer causing. But as far as, since I'm also, my masters also include the chemical, what we studied, that there are two types of white asbestos and blue asbestos. So blue asbestos is more dangerous as compared to white asbestos. So if your material contains blue asbestos, which means it is really hazardous. Even white asbestos is also hazardous, but not much as compared to the blue. So asbestos, if it is on the roof, or if it is on a drain channel, or if it is anywhere which is concrete, it is fixed, no problem. But once the asbestos sheets, they are going to crack, then the molecules, they disturb, and then with the passage of time, they are going to affect you. They will start spreading into the atmosphere, the internal atmosphere. For example, you have the room or you have the warehouse which has the asbestos sheets. So now these sheets are being cracked, because asbestos is a very powerful material. It gives you very strong strength against the temperature, very good strength against the atmosphere in the rains and in the dry season. It is always very good. So in the old time, most of the homes, they were being made of asbestos. The warehouses, they were being made with the asbestos. So anyway, asbestos is a very strong material, but at the same time, it is very dangerous for our health, because asbestos can cause us cancer. So that's why we need to be very much control. I used to do the audit of cement industries. In cement, they use the asbestos as there are like 50 kg bags are available for the asbestos, and they mix a small quantity of asbestos in the cement. So those operators or those helpers who are using these, they have to use the filter mask all the time, right? Because the normal mask cannot stop the asbestos particles. So they have to use the respirators all the time. So asbestos you can find on the construction side, you can find on the old areas. So how we are going to stop this hazardous material to go into our body? We need to identify the routes. What are the routes available? So this material can go into our body. For example, nowadays this virus, we are going to cover our mouth, which means ingestion.
Ingestion.
Because when we are taking the food, if it is a rotten food, we are going to take this food with our mouth. If these are this virus or the bacteria is available in the atmosphere, we are going to take this through our mouth, and which is called ingestion. If we are going to take the material through our nose, we call it inhalation, right? We call it inhalation. So this inhalation is due to with the nose. This ingestion is due to the with the mouth. And then we have absorption. So in the absorption, the hazardous material can enter into our body through our eyes or through our ears or any of the skin membrane. For example, you are already injured, your skin is damaged, and if you put some water on it, what will happen? You feel that there is something which is going into your body. So similarly, this can go into our body with our eyes. This can go in our body with our skin. So asbestos is this absorption is one of the route for entry. Then we have injection. What is injection? Injection means that it will enter in our body through the skin directly. For example, when you are sick, you are getting injection. So physically something going in your body, we call it injection. It could be a steel edge, it could be any sharp edge, it could be an injection, it could be a pin, anything through which the hazardous material can enter into our body. So this is called, these are all four routes of entry: ingestion, inhalation, absorption, and Absorption and last one is
Injection. Injection.
Injection. Very good. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now there is another important topic is called SDS, safety data sheet. What is safety data sheet? Or in other words, we call it MSDS, material
removed the
safety
M.
data sheet. Sometimes in UK they call it MSDS. In USA they call it SDS. So both are same. Don't confuse with MSDS or SDS.
But still the M it's used يعني.
Okay, we will add M. Don't worry. So MSDS, because in OSHA they use the terminology of SDS. So that's why in our course we are using the terminology SDS. For the same course we are delivering with UK regulation, we will be using MSDS. But even in America, in UK,
Okay.
the people
Clear.
who are in the field of chemicals, they know that MSDS and SDS are same. So we as a safety professional, we should also understand that there is no difference between MSDS and SDS, only the difference of the countries. So SDS or MSDS is a formal document which gives you the full information about this hazardous material. It is, as I told you, MSDS is a requirement of manufacturer. The manufacturer will produce the MSDS for their chemical. Then this MSDS will go to the distributor, and then once you are going to purchase this material or this chemical, this MSDS will be with you. You are not responsible for the development of MSDS, but you as a safety professional, it is your responsibility to maintain the MSDS for each chemical you are using on site, right? So MSDS is a very comprehensive document. It gives you the idea that what are the storage properties for this chemical, where you need to store, how to discard, what is the boiling point, what is the ignition point, what to do in case of first aid, how you are going to dispose of, and what are the environmental consideration for this. There are around 14 elements in the MSDS minimum. The good thing nowadays that after some years ago, I don't remember if 4 or 5 years, some years ago, that all throughout the world they are agree on two things. These two things are one of them is the label and one of them is the MSDS. Before couple of years, it used to happen that Americans, they have their own format of MSDS. UK people, they have their own format of MSDS. But after the discussion globally, now UK, Europe, Americans, Pakistani, Asians, Arabs, whoever is producing the chemical, they are agree on the formats for the MSDS and the label, that what will be the elements in the MSDS and what will be the elements in the label. So we call it GHS system. You can write GHS, Global Harmonized System, GHS, right? Global Harmonized System for classification. So MSDS is a very important document. Now there are three things which we need to maintain with the MSDS. You can write these things. I'm not sure if you will find this in the book and the presentation, but these are with my experience. I concluded that there are three things which are necessary with the MSDS. The first thing is the MSDS should be available at point of use. When we say point of use, what does it mean? Yes, Ibrar.
You can see.
No, I cannot see. I can hear only.
The point of you can see.
Okay, point where you can see. Okay, Ibrar, what do you think? Birhamin, what do you think?
It is being attached directly to the material.
No, when we say point of use, MSDS should be available at point of use. What does it mean?
Should be available.
Yeah, should be available. Where? When we say should be available at point of use, it means that where you are using this chemical. Sometimes what happened that you are using the chemical in the laboratory, or you are using the chemical in the workshop, and MSDS is available in the manager room or with the safety department. So this is unacceptable. This is not a good practice. MSDS rule internationally is that MSDS should be available at point of use. We cannot say that my MSDS is in the warehouse, my MSDS, because warehouse they receive the chemical, so MSDS is with them, so MSDS is available in the laboratory. No, wherever you are going to use the chemical, MSDS should be available at that area at this point of use. Then we have another thing, MSDS should be in the local language. Ideally, MSDS should be in the local language. If the people who are working in the areas, if they are understanding Arabic language, so MSDS should be available in the Arabic as well. If they understand, most of them understand English, so MSDS should be available in, because MSDS is a live document. It is not something that you will keep it in the file all the time. Okay, you can keep one copy of MSDS in the file for your records, but it's better to display the MSDS, to paste the MSDS where the people are going to use this chemical, so they, in case of any accident, they can see quickly how we are going to treat this chemical, or how we are going to treat this injured person due to this chemical. So MSDS should be at point of use, MSDS should be in the local language, and the third thing is MSDS should be updated. With the passage of time, the manufacturer of the chemicals or the hazardous substance, they produce the new versions of the MSDS. So MSDS new version should be available. You can do the, for example, audits on yearly basis for the MSDS or 6 monthly basis, and then you will have the updated MSDS all the time available, right? Now I will show you the one example of MSDS, how it looks like. You can see this is the MSDS. On your left side, this is MSDS. If you can see this colorful diamond.
Yes.
Everyone can see this.
Yes.
Very good. So this colorful diamond is basically the label, right? This is label. For any of the chemical, it is, as I told you, it is the responsibility of the employer to develop MSDS and the label. Sometimes, have you seen the Bowsers which are going on highway? On the back side, they have this diamond available. Maybe if you have seen, or you don't have seen, or you didn't focus. But now when you see that if the chemical is coming from, for example, some chemical from some chemical manufacturing company or petrochemical, this Bowser, this tanker, you will find this diamond available on the back side or on the side of this. So what is the purpose of this diamond? That it's a label, or you can say it is a summary which is going to give us the idea what is inside this chemical in the Bowser, or what is inside this container or the drum which is being used for this chemical. So this blue color, it is going to give you the picture about the health hazards. The rating starts from 1 to 4, 0 to 4, right? 4 is the maximum and 0 is the minimum, normal. So if the hazard rating is 3, which means that it is extremely danger, right? If 2, which means slightly hazardous. If 0, which means normal. If 4, which means if this chemical is going to touch, or if you are going to come in contact with this chemical, it is a deadly chemical. Okay, you can fatal. It can cause you fatality. Then this red color shows the fire hazard. This fire hazard, as we can see, that all of the things with fire are always red. So this red chemical, again, the rating is from 0 to 4. 0 means no burning, normal. 200 Fahrenheit if it is a bit having the burning point. 173, which means on a very light temperature it can burn out. So this is our fire hazard. And the yellow is the instability. There are two things. One is the stability, another is the instability. So this yellow one is the instability, because normally the chemicals are stable at the normal conditions. So this is going to give you that how much is the unstable this chemical, which means if 4, which means very unstable, if 3 is, which means better, 2 less unstable. So then we have white color. This white color means that any of the hazard which is not being mentioned in these 3, you can write this. For example, it could be an oxidizer, it could be an acid, it could be an alkali. So it could be you can no need to use water, or it could be a radiation hazard. So these are some of the requirements which are required to mention on the labels, and this NFPA diamond chart should always be available on the on our labels. So now assignment for you tomorrow is to find out MSDS formats of any of the chemical, just for your reference, just to find out and read them how it looks like. Now I'm going to show you a video about MSDS, so you will have better idea about these things. In the last video, did you hear the sound?
No.
Same problem.
No, sir.
I don't know what's the problem here with this. The idea about that how we need to store the material, how we need to lift the material by physically, by ourselves, and also with the help of machinery. When we are dealing the lifting and transporting the material through machines, most common is the forklift, and then we have cranes. So we will be discussing also some hazards about the safety or the safe precautions related to the forklift operations and the crane operations as well. And initially we will discuss about the hazards which are associated to human while they are using the manual handling. What is manual handling? Anyone can give the idea about manual handling?
Handled by a human being.
Human.
Very good, very good. Handled by a human being. It could be a male, it could be a female, it could be anyone. And it is not only the lifting, it could be any force. For example, pushing, pulling,
Exactly.
right?
Any force
Lifting,
involved.
any activity which involves your force, it can be considered in the manual handling. Very good examples of manual handling in our companies. We can see that in the cement industry, they are lifting the bags which are 50 kilo, which are more than 50 kilo.
Yes.
In fertilizer industries, they are carrying the bags which are more than 50 kilos. Similarly, in our companies, we can see sometimes we have to take out some heavy lifting, right? And there is no provision for crane or the forklift. So we need to use the trolleys. Sometimes we need to handle by ourselves. So these are all kind of our manual handling. Manual handling can cause you not only the injury, but also the ill health. Remember in the first day, we discussed about ill health issues. For example, the pain in your joints, your muscles pain, your back ache, these are all causes of manual handling. So sprains are all possible due to the manual handling. Fracture bruises are also possible because if you are lifting everything and if God forbid it is going to fall on yourself or on your foot, then you can have fracture as well, you can have bruises as well. OSHA permissible limit for men are 50 pounds, which means around 24 kg. A person, a man can be lift about 50 pounds as a manual handling. On the other hand, the woman is 25 pounds. 25 pounds means around, you can say 12 kilo. So this is the limit. If you are handling under this limit, this is okay, no problem. If you are handling more than this limit, then always you need to use some mechanical equipment. This mechanical equipment could be your trolley, this could be a chain block, this could be a forklift, this could be a crane, whatever the suitability allows you. Okay, even your normal trolley, hand trolley, your hydraulic trolleys, these are all the examples of our mechanical devices which we can use for the lifting purpose, right? Now precautions when we are going to do the manual handling. The first thing which we need to consider while we are going to start the manual handling, that think, plan your manual handling activity. What does it mean, plan your manual handling activity? That you need to be very clear about that, where you have to take this weight. Maybe you have to take this weight up to certain distance. Maybe the weight which you are going to carry, it has more volume. Maybe the passage which you are going to adopt, it contains stairs. Maybe the passage or the way you are going to take, it is slippery, it is damaged, it is dark, less lightning. Maybe there is raining going on. So we need to be very clear before starting our manual handling, because we cannot stop, or we cannot, it is not a good practice to stop your load or to stop your things without going to the final destination. So up to the final stage, you need to carry. If you are more than one person, you can divide yourself into teams. Okay, half of the distance can be carried by one person, and another half distance can be carried by another person. So manual handling, very important is to plan your activity. And then once you plan your activity, then start manual handling. So first thing is to keep your bottom straight always while you are pushing up or putting it down. The main important thing is to keep your back as straight as possible. Sometimes what happens, for example, in our homes, we have the this mineral water cans available, we have the gas cylinders available, and we have to do this manual handling, right? And how we are going to lift them? By doing the wrong postures. This wrong posture can cause us the back ache, the neck ache. They can cause us, the dislocation of our joints and the disc. So always keep your back straight, then sit down easily and take a firm grip on the load. If you can see this second picture, when you are taking the load, keep a firm grip, right? And then carry the load. Keep the load as close as to your body, right? And then stand up straight. When you are walking with the load, keep this load as close as your body. And if you have tummy like me, you can put the load on your tummy, no problem, right? So this is how you need to take the load, and then you start walking. When you are reaching your destination and you have to keep the load, then it's better that you should keep the load in 2 stages. For example, if you have a surface or table available, put the load on it and then on the ground if necessary. So if you don't have 2 stages provision available, you need to keep it directly on the ground. Again, follow the same thing. Sit with the load. Don't throw the load, or don't throw the load with the jerk. So you will also get the jerk in your back. So always keep the load with you and close to you while you are running with while you are walking with the load. Any question? Yes, guys, any question regarding to manual
Thank
handling?
you.
Okay. Now, if manual handling is not possible, as I told you, if the load is more than 50 pounds, if the load is heavy and you cannot carry it manually, you don't have the provision available for, you don't have the strong people like me, then you have to carry the load by means of mechanically. It could be in the form of trolley, it could be in the form of forklift, it could be in the form of crane, it could be in the form of chain block. Whatever the easier option and the most suitable option available, we will be using this option. While the forklift, we call in USA, they call it forklift, also called industrial truck, right? In USA, when we talk about industrial truck, it means that it is about forklift. So when you are using the forklift, you need to have 3 things very important with regards to the forklift driver. You can write these 3 things. These are not in the book or in the slides. The first thing you need to have with the driver is to pass the eyesight, right? Eyesight examination. His eyesight should be up to the mark. If he is wearing the glasses or not wearing the glasses, no problem, but he can see clearly. Then another thing which is an international requirement is to check the hearing audiometry. We call it audiometry test, which is for the hearing power, right? Audiometry means hearing power test. The third thing we need to have is the epilepsy test. Do you know epilepsy? What is epilepsy? Fits, right? In case of epilepsy, this situation comes for a very limited period of time, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. But in this 3-4 minutes, the person is unconscious. The person does not remain under his controls. So now imagine the two cases. For example, there is a emergency siren going on and your forklift driver does not listen. His audiometry is not good. He is in the warehouse somewhere at the corner and he's keeping the load, and there is an emergency in the company. So what will be happening? He will not be able to escape, right, at the right time. Now another example, for example, your forklift operator has this problem of epilepsy. Most of the time this epilepsy problem, it comes with the stress. Those people who remain under stress all the time, or they have some mental health is mentally they are ill health, although from the physically they will be looking very normal, but when they become, for example, if the boss is shouting on them or if they have the pressure of work, whenever they are tense, they can have this situation on them. So if he is carrying the forklift is carrying some load and he is driving the forklift, so and once he get this epilepsy situation, what will happen then? What will happen? Any idea? The load can hit the material, definitely. He can hit any of the human. He can hit any of the material. For example, if he is driving the forklift in the warehouse, then what will happen? That he will hit the warehouse, and due to this, the warehouse could be destroyed. The material, very, very expensive material, could be destroyed. He can hit the person, right? Or he can hit the persons as well. He can hit another forklift. So it is a very disaster condition. So that's why internationally these 3 medical tests are recommended for the forklift drivers before allowing them to have the forklift. And here in Kingdom also, there is another requirement that we need to have the forklift driver should be licensed, right? He must
Certified.
be third party certified or the license. Now even the Dalla, our Dalla, they also started the license for forklift.
And
So-
and he should have a paper from police that he don't have any cases before, and he don't go to jail before.
Okay, maybe this is a new requirement for me, but most of the time
Yes.
they ask for the third-party certificate, and now I have heard in many companies they are asking about that he should go to Dalla and he should get the license like the normal driving license. There is also forklift driving license, so they have to go, they have to pass the exam, and then they have to take this license, which is very good. So now we can see this another example as described by Mr. Moed, that they need to have the document available that they are not involved in any of the crime activity. So which is good. The more control we have, which means much better. Similarly, there is also a requirement for forklift to have this annual inspection of the forklift available. So when they are driving the forklift, they need to make sure that the load which they are carrying should not block their vision. The volume or the size of the load should not block their vision, because if their vision is blocked, for example, if they are carrying out refrigerator, if they are carrying out some other tall things, any of your cabinet, so it might be possible that the vision of the forklift driver is unclear. They cannot see. So this is not acceptable activity. we need to make sure that he can see. If he cannot see, then we need to have a flagman available who will guide them how to move forward. The forklift, when you are using the forklift, the weight should be under its capacity. The forklift should not be the over capacity. It should always be under the capacity. So when we are using the forklift, for example, your forklift is manufactured for 2 tons or 5 tons, then no need to carry more than 5 tons. But sometimes what happens, the companies, they put some dead weight on the other side, so they can lift the more weight with the more than its capability. But it is as required by OSHA, it is not allowed that the forklift should be carrying the maximum of its own load capacity, not more than its capacity. When the forklift is going to drive, it should be drive as the forks should be as lower as possible. So in case if any of the material which they are carrying, if it is even due to some damaged road or damaged surface, if this material is going to be fall, this will fall on the ground and there will be less destruction. But if the forklift the forks are on the height as compared to the ground, which means that now there will be more losses if this load is going to be tilted down. Clear? Now you can see some examples of the forklift. These are all called industrial trucks. There are multiple for the narrow surface. You will use the smaller one. You can use the hand trolleys. For the wide things, you can use the other kind of forklifts. So when we are going to use the forklift, we need to maintain their all the time. We need to have the maintenance available. For this purpose, you will also write how many of you have the forklifts available. How many of you have forklift at their site?
Me.
Okay. So do you have the forklift checklist available?
Yes.
Yes.
How to inspect the forklift? Because it is a necessary requirement for the forklift drivers.
Before each use.
Exactly. Sometimes you can say before each use. Sometimes if the forklift is a common activity or is a normal activity for the forklift drivers, they are operating in the warehouse, so they can use the forklift as a shift wise. That whenever they are going to taking over at the start of shift, we call it pre-startup checklist. Okay. You can, if possible for you guys, you can share the pre-startup checklist in the group by tomorrow. So our other friends, they can see that what are the normal requirement for the inspection. If possible, otherwise I will share with them. No problem. Okay.
Okay.
So we need to see, as I told you, that we need this checklist. Most of the time it involves the condition of the tires, the condition of the mirror, the condition of the battery, the condition of the safety belt, the speed limit, when was the last oil change, what is the the same thing which we can use in our cars for as a pre-startup checklist. The forklift checklist is also almost the same, but there are some more elements are being added. So this is the responsibility of the forklift operator or the forklift driver, that they have to fill it all the time whenever they are going to use the forklift, right? Then there are some also precautions related to the forklift charging area. There are 3 kinds of forklift available, right? This is not included in our course, just for your example. In industry, most of the time there are 3 common types of forklift available. The first type of common type of forklift are the forklift which are diesel based forklift, right? They have black smoke. So for example, if the forklift is working outside the facility in the open ground, they can use the diesel based forklift. Then we have the battery operated forklift. When the forklift are being transported inside the halls or inside the food manufacturing or inside the pharmaceutical companies, so they are required to use even our SFDA, so the Food and Drug Authority, they also require the same thing, that if the forklift is being operated inside the facility, it should be battery operated, right? And if the forklift is on the other side, the forklift can also use the LPG gas cylinder, like the same gas cylinder which we have in our home. It can also be used with the forklift. But the diesel type and the LPG type are not allowed in the food storage area or in the food manufacturing area or the pharmaceutical, the tablets or the medicine manufacturing area. But on the other areas, these can be allowed depending that, but the diesel type inside is not allowed, because due to the diesel there will be fumes. Due to the diesel there is a chance that any another accident is also possible if the spark is going to be produced with this diesel ignition. So we need to have 3 types of forklift, and according to their need, according to their requirement, we need to be very careful, especially when we are dealing with the battery type. It is the most safest, but the battery charging area is a very critical area, because there is very high voltage batteries are required, which are being used for the charging. Sometimes you will find that the batteries can also be bursted due to the overcharging. So we have to be very careful while we are charging something on the forklift battery at the battery operating area. There should be clear safety requirements, instructions should be available, how to dismantle the battery from the forklift and how to make it on the charging, and then how to remove the battery, because battery itself is a very very heavy. So this is also a manual handling. So we need to be very careful while so the forklift operator should not be injured, or they can do this activity as easier as possible. When you are required to store the material in the facility, there are some precautions available. The first thing, that we need to keep them away from the main boundary wall. Store material inside the building that are under construction, and at least 6 feet, right? If your building is under construction, then you need to keep inside, and at least 6 feet from the hoist way, because sometimes what happens that your crane or hoist is going on, is moving within the production area, within the operation area. So it should be at least 6 feet away from hoist way and inside the floor openings, and at least 10 feet away from the exterior walls. So the material, if you want to keep material inside the factory or outside the production area, so it should be at least 10 feet under the exterior walls, not very close to the exterior walls, because it might be possible if there is any hazard outside, if there are any rats or any mouses or any other pesticides are there, so they can also affect your material. So and for example, if there is any fire outside of the exterior wall, it can also damage your material. I remember one time I went into the company. This company was a pharmaceutical company, and beside their company there was a textile company. So when I went inside and I saw that the people are worried about the last night incident, I asked them what happened. They told that there was a small fire on our neighborhood company, but this was a small fire because it was a textile company. This textile or this you can say the used material or used cloth was with the pharmaceutical company's exterior wall. So for them it was not a big problem, because it was a small area or a small cloth which have been burned. But in the pharmaceutical industry, in the pharmaceutical company, with their exterior wall, they had the diesel storage, so which is very critical, and this diesel tank caught the fire at very fast, and there was a fire in the pharmaceutical. Alhamdulillah, the loss was not much higher, but now we can see this is a very good example that we need to do the risk assessment with our for the hazards which are associated with our neighbors as well. And for this purpose, we can also, our ISO 45000 standards also require that yes, you need to do the risk assessment which for the hazards which can be associated, which can impact on your activities. So similarly, this exterior wall, for example, if there is a fire on the other side of the exterior wall, so at least if your storage material is 10 feet away from this exterior wall, then you will be safe. Similarly, we need to separate compatible and non-compatible material with each other. Employees who work on stored grains and silos, hoppers or tanks with lifeline and safety belt. In addition, workers should consider placing bound material on racks and secure it by stacking, blocking or interlocking to prevent it from sliding, falling or collapsing. Whenever there is a need to use a forklift for the lifting of material, for the storage of material, we need to use it in a safe manner. Otherwise, there could be big disasters with even with the warehouses. I will show you the video where you will see that with very small mistakes of forklift, how much the losses are possible. Now, safe crane operation. Whenever we have the cranes functions in our facility, there are some precautions I will tell you verbally in this other than these slides, which are very basic requirement. For example, whenever you have crane, again, the first thing is this crane should be certified and inspected by third party. It is a mandatory legal requirement in Kingdom, right? The operator should also have the certificate or the license from third party to operate the crane. Then when you are going to operate the crane like the forklift, you need to check the capacity of the crane. You cannot lift more than the weight of the crane. Otherwise, this will cause the accident. Similarly, if whenever you are using the crane, if it is overhead crane within your company in the production or in the maintenance hall, no problem. You can, the operator who is being trained for this purpose, they can operate. But if it is a mobile crane, which is being used for the external purpose, then you need to have flagman available. Flagman is a person who is always giving the signals to the crane operator, because crane operator cannot see everywhere. So the eyes of the crane operator is basically flagman. He is the one who is going to give the directions all the time to the crane operator. So what you have to do, how much you have to lift. Whenever you are going to, or the crane operator is going to lift something, he has to see the load chart. The load chart is a requirement which should be available with all of the cranes. It is mostly the load chart is being displayed on the operator's cabin, where they can calculate and they can see that how much weight they need to carry out with the angle. Because when we say 5 tons crane, when we say 50 tons crane, it is not necessary that each angle it will be carry out, it can handle the 50 tons. The more towards perpendicular, the more angle towards 90 degree, which means the less weight. And if the crane is full straight, which means the weight which can be carried with this crane is the minimum now, very less. If it is a 50 tons crane, maybe 20 or 25 tons it can carry only, not more than this. So with the angle, we need to check how much load is possible. So this will be available in the crane operator's compartment or cabin, where he can calculate that how much he has to lift and how much is the angle. So how much is the maximum lifting capability for this purpose. Whenever you are going to use the crane, we need to check the power lines in our areas. This crane must not be touching the power lines, because the area should be barricaded. In some companies, we have seen that they have the system of permit to work for the crane activity. So if the crane activity is not a normal, is not a routine job for them, then whenever they have the crane available at their site for some shutdown activity or the maintenance activity, then it must be safe and it must be controlled by permit to work. Direct workers always to keep hosting chains and ropes free of kinks or twists. We need to make physical inspection. It should be the responsibility of crane operator or the inspectors that whenever they are going to use the crane, they should check physically. When we say physically, which means from their eyes. They are not the expert for the inspector, they are inspections, but at least they can see that if there is any crack, if there is any kinks available, so the load can be carried out easily and without any hazard. Train workers to attach load to the load hook by slings, fixture and other devices that have the capacity to support the load on the hook. The training of the workers or the training of the operators are very important when they are lifting the load. Otherwise, there is always a chance that it is a very critical activity. They can fall and it can cause them accident. Yes.
Other
Any
question.
question?
Question, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
please.
can you share with us regarding how to compute manually the percentage of lifting for the crane? How to
Outer
calculate
lifting?
it manually? Yeah. Percentage for the lifting.
Which stage?
The percentage for lifting
Okay,
on
okay,
crane
okay.
operation.
Okay. Percentage of lifting. Okay, I will share with you later. In the
Okay.
group.
Mr.
Thank you.
Anas,
Yes.
how are you? We have a different plan here in our facilities.
Mhm.
We use something named a critical lift plan.
Yeah.
Any crane or forklift with I think with more than 10 kilo or like this, we will use a critical lift plan, and we have this flagman names a rigger 1,
Exactly,
rigger
rigger.
2, rigger 3, and
Exactly.
every one of this rigger have different certification, different requirement, and every one of them it is responsible for quantity of load. Rigger
Exactly.
1, he take the highest quantity, and he should pass the exam. Very difficult requirement to be certified as a rigger 1.
Exactly.
And we do this critical lift plan in each
Of the lifting
uh,
activity.
yes,
Yeah,
critical name
these are, see,
critical
these
lift
are,
plan.
this critical lifting plan is necessary when you are using the mobile crane, external cranes. Sometimes we have the internal cranes, right? The host, we call it, in other words, we call it host. So we have the host available, we have the overhead cranes available for this purpose. Lifting, for example, when I was working in the steel industry, we had the coils, 50 tons, 25 tons. So we have to carry these coils by the help of cranes. So for this purpose, operator, he should be the trained operator and he can do this. But yes, for the external, when you are using the third party cranes, and for the some special task activity, you need to have the critical lifting, or in other words, simple as we can say, lifting plan available. Even in Aramco, in Sabic, all big companies, they require that you should have the lifting plan available, where you are going to define that what you are going to lift and how. There should be a competent person. Remember, yesterday we discussed about scaffold inspector, scaffold erector. Similarly, there are riggers, rigger level 1, rigger level 2, rigger level 3. So it depends on the capacity, how much capacity they can instruct. Because as I told you before, that the crane operator can see the limited area. It is the rigger, is the person who is the eyes for the crane operator. He is the one who is guiding. Sometimes these riggers are very rich, because it's a very critical activity, and you are going to hire them on per hourly basis. So they will come in their Land Cruiser and they will say, do this, do this, do this, and then they are going to start lifting. Because if in any accident is going to be happen due to the lifting, the issue will be with the rigger, not with any other person. So they have to be very careful, and that's why they charge very heavy fees for this purpose. So yeah, you have given us a very good reminder that for the external cranes we need to have the lifting plan available. Right now, can you see the screen? I'll show you a quick video and then we will take 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back. Can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Top 10 forklift accidents. Some accidents of forklift. So our next topic is about ergonomics. What is ergonomics? Anyone can describe something about ergonomics? Yes, guys, are you there? Available now or sleep?
No, I am
related
there, but I don't understand the agronomy.
for me related to the worker who is repeatedly work, like
Okay.
for example, for I forgot the machine.
No problem. Yeah, repeating task is also under the ergonomics. What else? Ergonomic is basically, it's a science. Nowadays, there is a master's and there is a PhD in the ergonomic studies. So ergonomic is the way of designing workstation. It depends on three things: how your workstation is designed, what is your work practices, how you are going to perform the task, and the workflow to accommodate your capabilities. Sometimes what happened that we are performing the task which does not facilitate our physique, right? Which is not according to our physique. We are doing very heavy tasks, or we are doing repetitive tasks.
Sabar ako testingin nga dyan. Payong ko ini.
So all these things, these three things, work designing of our workstation. Remember we discussed before, what is our workplace? Our workplace is the same like our workstation. So designing of a workstation according to your work practices and workflow. For example, you are performing the job, you are an operator or the labor on the, which is responsible for the conveyor. Some product is coming out from the conveyor. For example, I used to go in cigarette manufacturing companies. I used to go in pharmaceutical companies. I used to go in food companies. So when you have small biscuits like Tiki packs, when you have medicines, strips, right? When you have cigarette packs, so they are producing like 5,000 cigarettes in 1 minute. So how you are going to handle it? So for this purpose, you need to have a full team available for the operators who are going to handle these packs, because these packs have to take from conveyor and put in the trolley. Otherwise, you cannot, stop. You cannot wait for the holding these packs. There will be a huge pile of the packs or of the medicines. So they have to do this activity very fast. So this kind of activity, it comes and it can cause you the ergonomic. Even you cannot take the rest. So for this purpose, they have the duty assigned. Okay, 20 minutes you will be doing, 20 minutes other guy will be doing. For example, you are doing some drilling activity. So this drilling activity under the ground, with the hilti, right? It requires a lot of force. So any weak person cannot do this activity. So the task is not according to your capability. So ergonomic factors or ergonomic related to the issues or the disease related to the ergonomic are going to arise when our workstation does not meet our working capability, right? So this is very necessary to be aligned with each other. Ergonomic design reduces the risk factor known to the contribute to occupational ergonomic injuries and ill health, such as sprain, strains, and cumulative trauma disorder, CTD. If the work is performed in awkward posture or the repetitive motion with excessive force, fatigue and discomfort may result. Under these conditions, muscles, tendons, ligaments, nerves, and blood vessels can be damaged. If you are going to do the activity, repetitive activity so many times, or if you are pushing, if you're doing the manual handling for long time, so these kind of damages are possible within your body. Injuries of this type are called musculoskeletal disorder. Musculoskeletal disorder, in short phase, we call it MSDs. Ergonomic depends on three factors. These factors are risk factors inherent to the workers, risk factor inherent to the task, what activity he is going to do, and risk factor inherent to the environment, in which environment he is performing the task. So these all factors are the contributing towards ergonomic. For example, a worker is a healthy worker, but the chair on which he is sitting or the activity which he is going to perform, it is not meeting his capability. So his health is under stress. His health is under effect. Similarly, the worker is a very weak and the activity is very strong. So again, it can cause the harm to the worker's health. Similarly, if the worker is very good and the task which he is going to perform is very good, so this could cause but the environment where he is performing the task, it's very humid, it contains moisture, or it has very high heat. So in this activity also, the effect on the human health is possible. So environment, these all factors are responsible for ergonomics. These are the contributing factors which can cause us ergonomics problem. MSDs include a group of conditions that involve the nerves, tendons, muscles, and supporting structure, such as intervertebral disc. Intervertebral disc you can see in the picture. Can you see the below picture of the black picture? So this the line which is going on our back, these are all intervertebral discs. So they represent a wide range of disorder which can differ in severity, with mild periodic symptoms to the severe chronic. What is chronic disease? Any idea about chronic?
It's a long-term disease or something.
Very good. We have the chronic means the long-term disease, and it's like it will not come in one day. It will not be happen in this way. Similarly, for example, exposure to asbestos. If you are exposed to a small quantity of asbestos, you will not get cancer in 1 day or 2 days. Similarly, if your working practices are not good, these are incorrect, these are not according to the ergonomic factors, so you will not get sick in 1 day. For example, when I'm doing my office work on my laptop, my neck is not meeting the requirement of ergonomic. The screen should be on 180 with my eyes. So sometimes I also get the neck in my neck. So this is the problem. This is again the problem is due to this, the problem related to the ergonomics. So carpal tunnel syndrome, you can see that if you are using the keyboard all the time, if you can see this hand in the picture, these are the causes of carpal tunnel syndrome. These, if the nerves are going to be blocked, right, you will get the swelling in your hands. If your hands are typing all the time in one condition and they are not going to take the breaks time to time. Similarly, tension neck syndrome, if you can see this black picture, tension neck syndrome, and low back pain. So these discs, the intervertebral discs are going to be disturbed if we are not going to have the breaks, and if we are not going to have a movement during our activities. If we will be continuing the activities without any break or moving our body parts, then these kind of diseases are always possible. So that's why we are also taking the breaks after every 1 hour or 1.5 hours, so we can move and we can have our muscles in place again. MSDs are often confused with the ergonomic. Ergonomic is the science of fitting workplace condition and the job demands to the capabilities of worker. In other words, MSDs are the problem and ergonomic is a solution, right? MSDs are all the ill health situations like carpal tunnel syndrome, tension neck syndrome, low back pain. These are all MSDs. And how to overcome these problems? We need to have the ergonomic. If you see now some furnitures, for example, IKEA, if you go to the IKEA and you will see some furnitures, they have clearly written that this office furniture is designed ergonomically. What does it mean, design ergonomically? Which means that it will be fit with your posture. When we are using the movable chair, for example, I'm sitting on the chair, I can move easily. I can go and I can come back. And so why? Because if it is not moving, if it does not have the arm rest, then after some time my body will become sick of these things. So I have to take the breaks very frequently. If you have a moving chair, then at least you can move your body. So that's why these ergonomic furniture, these all, even for example, couch, the tables, the chairs, these are now being produced like ergonomic. So you can adjust the screen, you can adjust the height of the table or the chair according to your need, right? MSDs, the contributing factors for you and your employees should be aware of for example, awkward postures, repetitive motions, forceful exertions, pressure points, and vibration. What about the driver who is operating who is driving the dumpers on the mountains? Whenever there is a new building or there is a new construction is going on, so in Kingdom they have to cut the mountains in various areas. So these dumper drivers, they are taking the sand, they are taking the stones, the big rocks on them. they are always having vibration within their body. So if they are not going to take the breaks, if they will continue this activity for a long time, then they can have the MSD's problems. There are also environmental factors which are associated with the workplace that can cause problem. For example, extreme high temperature, manual dexterity, cold temperature can decrease the blood flow, muscle strength, and manual dexterity. What is manual dexterity? Anyone can have the idea about manual dexterity?
Like vomiting sensation.
No. Manual dexterity, which means that even you will not be able to carry something. Sometimes, have you seen the old people? They cannot carry the spoon, right? They cannot carry the cups. The grip will be very weak. So these kind of problems are always possible. These are all MSDs. If these problems are due to your work-related activities, due to your occupational activities, we call it WMSDs. WMSDs can cause or made more worse due to the environment, and the symptoms are pain, numbness and tingling, reduced workers' productivity, lost time from work, temporary or permanent disability. Now you can see lost time from work. I recall the studies, the last year study shows that most of the people in offices, they are being absent due to the ill health issues, right? They are going to have the problem due to ill health issues, rather than they are going to have the the absenteeism due to the injuries issues. Because most of the time we are focusing on safety. We don't focus on the ill health issues. So we need to focus also on the ill health issues. So the worker productivity is going to be reduced, the lost time from work, right? Temporary or permanent disability, inability to perform tasks, or increase in workers' compensation costs. So these are all work-related issues which are possible due to the ergonomics. Any question?
Thank you.
Okay, I will share now the next video related to the ergonomics. I'm sure that you will not be able to hear the volume of the video, but at least you can see. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
There is a volume.
Now we can hear.
Yeah.
Standing, walking, it really doesn't matter. Proper bone and joint alignment is key. So straighten up that back and keeping ears.
Now our next topic is about confined space or permit required confined space. To understand, there are two things which we need to understand. What is the work permit and what is the confined space and the controls of the confined space. So before starting confined space, let's discuss something about the permit. What is the work permit? Anyone having idea about work permit?
Work permit is the contractor between the worker and the operation to ensure the work is safe.
Very good. What else? Work permit is which kind of control? Remember yesterday we discussed about hierarchy of controls: elimination, substitution, engineering control, administrative control. So work permit is which kind of control?
Administrative.
Administrative.
Very good, very good. Work permit is our administrative control. So how many of you are having work permit system in your companies already operating?
Me?
Okay,
So am I.
okay. Bus. What about
For
Zubair?
me, we have two kind of system: receiver permit and issuer permit.
Issuer permit. Very good. See,
And we have 4 colors.
yeah, different companies have different colors and different types of permit. This is what I'm going to give you the summary about, although it is not the part of our course, but just for your information, because when you talk about the safety, permit to work is one of the basic requirement for any of the health and safety management system. Work permit is a written authorization, basically. Written authorization between two parties. These two parties could be anyone. For example, operations department and the maintenance department. For example, contractor and the client, right? This work permit is a very good control. It can also save you legally because it is a written authorization in which both parties are going to give the agreement that we both have seen the hazards which are possible in this area or in this activity, and we have applied the control. If any accident happens, then both parties will be responsible, not only the contractor or not only the one body, but the both parties will be responsible. Work permit has many types. It varies from companies to companies. OSHA does not define the types of work permit. The OSHA says that you need to consider the permit according to your own requirement. For example, in one company, they are using the cranes, so they have the permit to work for crane as well. But in another company, there is no use of crane. They don't use crane in their maintenance or any shutdown activities. So they don't have the crane. Most of the time, like Aramco defines 4 types of permit. One of them is the cold permit. Then we have hot permit for any hot job. For any normal job, we can use a cold permit. For any gas cutting like welding, grinding activities, we need to use the hot permit. And then we have permit at confined space. Whenever we are going to perform any of the activity in the confined space, we need to use the permit. We call it permit to work for confined space. Then there is another permit for use for the working at height. So if you are going to perform any activity working at height, so you will be using the permit to work for working at height. Then, as I told you, sometimes companies, they have the crane permit, they have the vehicle entrance permit. So depending on the requirement of the company can define their types of permit. But permit requirements, again, it is not being defined. OSHA does not says anything mandatory for the types of permit. This company has to define their own system. So in the permits, there are two parties, receiver and the issuer. Issuer is most of the time, issuer is the client, or you can say the operations department where you are going to perform the job. And receiver is the contractor or the maintenance department who are going to perform the job. So you need to focus on these things. Sometimes the companies, they have one format which is applicable for any kind of activity. So they can use one format. Sometimes companies, they have different color formats for different types of permit. They can use different type of permit. So it all goes to the company. It's the company's own choice or their client choice, how many kind of permits they have to use. Okay. Now most of the time the permit is being issued for 8 hours initially. And in the permit, you will be attaching the risk assessment. You have to attach the certificates, third-party certificates of the workers who are working. For example, forklift operator, for example, forklift itself, crane operator, rigger. There are many documents which can be attached with the work permit. In Aramco Sabiq, in oil and gas sector, all the refineries, taking the permit is one of the most difficult jobs. Sometimes you have to delay for 4 hours. Sometimes you have to wait for 6 hours. So, and all of your work is on hold unless you don't have the permit available. So permit is a very good, in short, permit is a very good control. Those who don't have the system for permit, they can start the permit in their companies for, for any of the critical job. And tomorrow, even if Mr. Moyed, if you can show some sample pictures of the permit, if you have available, just the pictures. We are not saying to show the exact format, but just to have the idea to our participant, to your group, that how the permit looks like, we can share in the groups. So everyone can get
For
the benefit
just,
of it.
I have some comment for call. It is defined as hand tools, just.
Yeah. The
Yes,
code permit
this
is which requires the hand tools, or sometimes there is a less critical job, but it does not require any hot activity. So you can use confined. core
and
permit.
and the hot permit is defined as any ignition source. Any
Exactly.
ignition
Ignition. So it could be gas
Yes.
cutting, welding,
And we
any
have
activity.
confined space and release permit.
Release permit.
Four kind of permit. Release permit that have any kind of activity that may be any release gas or oil or something. We use release permit. And usually we use hot work permit with release permit.
Yes, yes. Another very
Okay.
good thing which he highlighted, that we can use multiple permits at one time. It is not
Yes.
necessary that only we will be using one permit. For example, you have to do the activity of welding in a confined space. So you will be issuing two permits, one for the confined space and one for the hot job. So similarly, if the job requires that you need to have two permits together, you can issue the two permits together. The more permits, which means more control, right?
Yes. And some kind of permit needs not just issuer and receiver signature, need a high level signature like
Exactly.
division head, superintendent, manager approval. That means it is very critical job.
Exactly, especially when you are going to do any hot work job inside the refinery or inside the petrochemical plant.
Yes.
So it is
Yes.
you need to have more precautions. That's why the signature is from the higher authority. So the control will be more stronger, right? This is the only
Yes.
purpose. Because if higher authority is going to approve or sign permit, which means that he is taking the responsibility. So which means he will make sure that I've seen all the possible controls. We have taken all the possible precautions, and then we have allowed the work to be done. So confined space, as required by OSHA 1910 section 146, it defines about confined space. What is confined space? It is the large enough and configured so an employee can enter and perform the assigned task. Remember, yes, we first day we discussed about the floor hole, floor opening. So confined space is floor hole or floor opening?
Floor opening.
Yes,
Opening.
Mr. Zubair, Mr. Bremen.
Opening.
Very good.
Opening. Floor
Right.
opening.
Very good. Very good. Because it is more than 12 inches, right?
That's
If it is less than 12 inches, how a person can go inside? So OSHA defined the large enough and configured so an employee can enter and perform the assigned task. The confined space will always has limited or restricted means of entry and exit. The confined space cannot be used as an occupancy. For example, you cannot say that my office is in confined space. My workplace is confined space. Whenever you are working in a confined space, you will be going for a very limited period of time in the confined space with all the precautions and the permit, and then you will come back. So confined space cannot be used as a continuous occupancy for any of the activity. And then NSI standard additionally define an enclosed area large enough and configured to allow a person to enter. Remember, I told you NSI standard for PPE. You have to search NSI standards for PPE. So this NSI is an American National Safety Institute, right? It also defined the confined space as enclosed area large enough and configured, which allows a person to go inside and perform their task. Clear? Permit required confined space. For example, the confined space which requires a permit. It contains or has potential to contain hazardous atmosphere. The main hazard of the confined space is the hazardous atmosphere, because confined space is one of the most critical activities. You never know what is inside the confined space until unless you are going to test. We cannot